Your medicine cabinet is a museum of 50,000 years of survival. Every time you reach for a small white pill to kill a headache, you aren't just using modern chemistry. You are participating in an ancient ritual that began long before the first city was ever built. Most of us see our ancestors as primitive. We picture them as helpless brutes, shivering in caves, waiting for the smallest infection to end their lives. But that's a massive misunderstanding of history. The truth is much more impressive, slightly terrifying, and surprisingly relatable. If those people hadn't figured out how to hack their own biology with rocks and weeds, you wouldn't be here to watch this. So, how did they actually survive? How did they fight back against a world that was constantly trying to kill them? Let's start with the first medical breakthrough in human history. It wasn't a plant. It wasn't a tool. It was a hug. In 1957, archaeologists in the Shanidar cave of northern Iraq found a skeleton that changed everything. They called him Shanidar I. This man was a total wreck. His right arm had been amputated at the elbow. He was blind in one eye. He had a massive healed fracture on his skull, and arthritis so severe it likely made every step feel like walking on broken glass. In a survival of the fittest world, he should have been tiger bait within a week. He couldn't hunt. He couldn't gather. By all accounts, he was a massive liability to a nomadic tribe that had to move constantly to find food. But here's the kicker. He didn't die as a child. He lived to be nearly 50 years old. That's an eternity in caveman years. How is that possible? It's simple. His tribe chose to carry him. They fed him. They protected him. They cleaned his wounds. This is the oldest evidence of healthcare on the planet. It didn't start in a sterile hospital with white coats. It started around a campfire, with a group of people who refused to leave a friend behind. Honestly, I sometimes struggle to get a text back from my friends. Yet these people were providing lifelong nursing care 60,000 years ago. Compassion was our first antibiotic. It was the original safety net. Before we had science, we had each other. But kindness only goes so far when you have a parasitic infection or a raging fever. For that, our ancestors turned to the original pharmacy, the ground beneath their feet. Take Ötzi, the Iceman, as a prime example. He was found frozen in the Alps after 5,300 years, and he was carrying a prehistoric medical kit. Inside his gear, scientists found 2 pieces of birch polypore mushroom strung on a leather cord. Now, Ötzi wasn't carrying these for a snack. When researchers analyzed his stomach, they found he was riddled with intestinal parasites. As it turns out, that specific mushroom contains compounds that act as a natural laxative and a potent antibiotic. He wasn't a gourmet chef. He was an outpatient carrying his own prescription. It wasn't just him. Over in Spain, at a site called El Cidrón, archaeologists found Neanderthal dental plaque, essentially 50,000-year-old teeth junk. They found traces of yarrow and chamomile. These plants have zero nutritional value. They taste bitter. They're terrible for a salad. So why eat them? Because they are medicinal. These people understood the chemical properties of their environment through 300,000 years of trial and error. They were doing organic chemistry while the rest of us would probably still be trying to figure out which end of the spear is the pointy one. And then there's the willow bark. For thousands of years, humans across the globe discovered that chewing on certain tree barks made the pain go away. They didn't know about salicin or how it converts into salicylic acid in the liver. They just knew that nature provided a solution for a throbbing toothache. Fast forward to the late 1800s, and a company called Bayer turned that exact same molecule into what we now call aspirin. The pill in your medicine cabinet is the same molecule your ancestors pulled off a tree in a Spanish forest. Next time you grab a bottle at CVS, remember you're just doing a high-tech version of what a Neanderthal did 50 millennia ago. Sometimes, though, herbs and hugs weren't enough. Sometimes the problem was inside the head, literally. This brings us to the most extreme medical practice in human history, trepanation. This is just a fancy scientific word for drilling a hole in someone's skull while they are still very much alive. We found these holy skulls all over the world, from Peru to Russia to China. Why would they do this? They likely believed it released pressure from a brain injury, cured seizures, or let out evil spirits that caused migraines. Now, your first instinct is probably to assume this was a 0% survival rate. I certainly wouldn't sign up for a skull drilling session in a cave. But when archaeologists look at the edges of these holes, they see something shocking: bone regrowth. That means the patient didn't just survive the surgery, they lived for years afterward. In some regions, the survival rate was as high as 90%. Think about that for a second. No anesthesia, no electricity, no sterile rooms, just a sharp piece of flint, a lot of nerve, and a community that knew what it was doing. They were literally reverse engineering the human body with stones. Was it terrifying? Yes. Was it effective? Apparently, more often than not. I'd like to see a modern surgeon try that with a piece of jagged rock. Of course, you couldn't just walk up to a random person and ask for a skull drilling. You needed a specialist. Enter the shaman. In virtually every ancient culture, there was one person who acted as the tribe's living library. They held the knowledge of which berries cured diarrhea and which ones caused a permanent nap. In 2021, researchers found a 12,000-year-old grave of a female shaman. She was buried with tortoise shells, leopard parts, and an eagle's wing. She wasn't just a religious figure, she was the group's cloud storage for medical data. If the shaman died without an apprentice, the tribe lost everything. They lost their science, their history, and their safety net in a single day. Her knowledge was the difference between a minor illness and a total extinction event for her people. There's also the strange reality of how they lived. Before we settled down into cities and started living on top of each other, we were nomads. We lived in small, mobile groups. This was actually a massive health advantage. If a virus popped up in a group of 20 people, it either died out or everyone got immune. It couldn't jump to the next group because the next group was 50 miles away. We didn't have the flu or smallpox back then because those are diseases of crowds. We traded the safety of small groups for the convenience of grocery stores, and in return, we got global pandemics. It's a bit of a be careful what you wish for moment in our history. Even things we think of as sickness today were actually survival features. Take fever. Today, we freak out and take medicine to bring our temperature down the second we hit 100 degrees. But ancient humans seem to understand something we forgot. They didn't try to cool people down. They often moved them closer to the fire. They let the body cook the infection. Modern science now tells us that fever is your immune system's way of turning up the heat to kill pathogens that can't handle the grill. Your ancestors weren't malfunctioning, they were fighting back. Their bodies were the original smart home systems, adjusting the temperature to save the occupant. So would you rather spend a week hunting a mammoth or a day sitting in a cave painting a wall? Personally, I'm choosing the wall every time. But back then, staying active and living in small groups was their best defense. They didn't have 5G, but they had a lifestyle that was basically a natural vaccine. They didn't have WebMD, but they had 300,000 years of collective memory. Roughly 25% of their children didn't make it to age 5, which is a heartbreaking price to pay. But the ones who did survive passed on a legacy of resilience that is literally written into your DNA. You are the descendant of the people who didn't give up. You come from a line of survivors who chewed willow bark, trusted their shamans, and drilled holes in each other's heads because they refused to let death have the last word. The strange part is that we still do all of this. We've just swapped the flint for lasers and the leopard skins for lab coats. We still rely on the same plants, the same social support, and the same biological defenses. Maybe the story of ancient medicine isn't about how much we've changed. Maybe it's about how some things, like the need to care for the broken and the drive to find a cure, are the most human things about us. Next time you feel under the weather, remember you have a few 100,000 years of R&D backing you up. You're part of a very old, very successful team. And honestly, I think that's worth a little bit of wonder.